Well, I think it was 1996 when a very senior advisor from UNESCO visited Elephanta, and he was totally shocked because there were children playing cricket outside the caves. There were people standing on top of the Trimurti to be photographed. He actually told us this. They were cooking inside the caves, and there was the walls were broken, the barbed wire was corroded. It was a complete mess. There was garbage over the place, there were open nalas around. When you go there today, you can't even begin to imagine how poorly kept the site was at that time. Nobody was really interested in it. And he went there and he was in a state of shock when he came back. And he gave an interview to the Times of India that landed up on the front page: Elephanta will be delisted unless something is done urgently. And Mrs. Jacker, Upur Jacker, was chairman of INTACH at that time. And I had just joined, and I had just become convener of Mumbai. I was very young. Mrs. Jacker said to me, we have to do something. And so the gentleman concerned came over and we had a chat with him. And management plans, remember this is 1996, management plans were just beginning to come into vogue. They were just conceived of, in fact, at that time. And Bernard Fielden was the gentleman. He had written a definitive book on how World Heritage Sites should be managed. And the first management plan ever done was done for the Roman walls in Britain, and English Heritage had worked on it. And so he said we should get them in as and get them in as an advisor, and we should do a management plan for Elephanta. I had no idea, and that's how the project started. So the first thing that we did to understand how we should prepare a management plan, because a management plan had never been done in India. And the ASI said to me and to INTACH, we've never done this exercise, so what should we do? So because Bernard Fielden was also an advisor to UNESCO, we got UNESCO involved. And we decided to have a seminar. Now because Mrs. Jacker was there, and Mrs. Jacker, as we know, was very close to Mrs. Gandhi, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, and they together set up INTACH in 1984. Everybody came. We had an amazing seminar, 2-day seminar, which is really, I don't think has really ever been repeated, because we had about 600 people come. We had every top bureaucrat there. All the ministers were involved and they came. All the people involved in culture, everybody came. Plus we had lots of students, architecture students and other students who came, and UNESCO came from their representatives from Thailand, because there are regional offices in Thailand and Bangkok, and from Paris, from the World Heritage Center, the people came. They came, the British English Heritage came. So we had tremendous representation. It was, the seminar made tremendous impact. And we then set about developing a management plan. And that was a learning curve, because we really didn't, I'm an art historian, not a management expert per se, and so there was a lot of learning to be done along the way. But what the government did is, and what we requested them to do, is to set up a special purpose vehicle under the MMR. They decided to do it, the Chief Minister decided to do it under the MMRDA, Mumbai Metropolitan Regional Development Authority. The Commissioner was given authority to bring in all the various agencies. There are several agencies involved with the management of Elephanta, and that is one of the problems of working at Elephanta and preparing this management plan. So, under the special purpose vehicle, we gathered all the agencies, and then we defined what our goals would be and what we would try to do. Now, of course, that's in itself a very interesting story, because the goals that the MMRDA Commissioner had were very different from the goals that I had. the goal that the MTDC chairman had, the MTDC managing director had, were different from what we as INTACH, that had done a lot of research around the site, had. I should just backtrack also and say that we had no money. INTACH is an NGO, and we thought to ourselves, now we have to raise money because ASI said we'll give you a little money. UNESCO gave us $25,000, but they gave it, the ASI insisted that they would take the money. So we had very little money. So I came up with an idea to do a big Elephanta festival event and to do a fundraising auction. It was the first auction ever done for fundraising in this country. I'd seen it happen before earlier, but in 1997, I don't think anybody had done it before. And there had been auctions, but not for fundraising. So I invited 25 of the top Indian artists, and because was involved with art, I was on the National Gallery of Modern Art Committee, they all agreed. I mean, some were a bit hesitant, but at the end I said, you have to give the artwork because it is for such an important cause. Every artist agreed. Today they're all very famous. K.G. Subramanian, Mathur Dodia. I mean, it's a book, and everybody was a who's who of artists. And they kept a small percentage. The galleries kept, one gallery that came over to work with us, and they kept a very small percentage. And most of it came to INTACH to prepare this management plan. And in a sense, that was the creation of the little corpus for INTACH in Mumbai that has sustained us over the last 20 years and has enabled us to do so much other work. Of course, then we've raised more funds, we've done more projects, but we spent a good 10 lakhs on just preparing at that time, 20 years ago, preparing this plan. Because we had to play the architects, we had to do the survey, we had we did we contributed to the restoration of the site, the whole of the site museum, which was earlier the caretaker's cottage, which was one of the things that we had suggested that we don't need, it's a lovely little colonial cottage. We shouldn't remove it from the site. How can we repurpose it? And we suggested a site museum because a lot of people, I would visit the site almost every week. And I would see that people didn't understand, and if what were these sculptures? There was no information. And if you didn't have a guide and you had to pay 500 rupees for a guide, now students didn't want to pay that money. What did you do? So I said, let's put up and make this into a site museum. ASI agreed. We paid for that whole exhibit. Now that's 20 years ago. Today if you go, that's locked up and it's in a completely derelict condition again. Anyway, so we had an incredibly successful event where Shubha Mughal sang, where she composed shlokas to Shiva, Valli, Alandan Valli danced within the caves, and people talk about that event even today because we had a dinner, and we took boats out, we festooned the boats, and everybody knew everybody, and it was really wonderful, and the auction was a huge hit because everybody bought. It is documented. It's documented with photographs. We don't have a video of it. Again, at that 20 years ago, the technology wasn't, and it was very expensive to do things like video documentation, and we just didn't have the funds. So we then worked on both the management plan, as you see all this documentation here, tremendous documentation that was commended by UNESCO as one of the best management plans. They received it from Asia, not just from India. And then in fact, they, because they were so happy with our work, they recommended that we should do the Chhatrapati Shivaji Terminus documentation for World Heritage status. And then we did the site museum. We worked with them, but then what we were trying to do with the government was to ensure that there was an interpretation center, that, that we can go forward, the conservation also should go forward. Now, I have to say that in conservation, ASI doesn't let any other agency get involved, but they were doing a lot of cement work, okay? And we had experts from World Monument Fund and other organizations come and say, which is very obvious knowledge, today it's well known, you can't mix two materials. When you put cement on stone, what you will get is at some stage, it's a kind of repair job that is done. One, it corrodes the stone because it stops the stone from breathing. Okay? Stone is a natural organic material and it must breathe. Okay? So if you put cement on it, cement is not porous and it will prevent air from going in. So so that area that is joined to the cement will start to corrode. So you're in fact damaging the site instead of improving the site. And we've been saying this to the ASI. What they can do is just ensure that it's stable, which means you do not allow water ingress. You stop. What are the factors that contribute to deterioration? Water and salt water and the air is one of the main reasons of the deterioration of that limestone. Basically, it's limestone. And so that's one of the main reasons that it deteriorates. And so you need to keep environmental controls to ensure that further deterioration doesn't happen. But the ASI has a different idea of how sites should be managed. What we were trying to suggest was that we should have an interpretation center where we can actually recreate what these caves must have been in their original condition. Now, if you go to the caves, when you enter on the left-hand side, if you look at the ceiling, you will see remnants of paint. Not paint really, but of color. Some kind of material that was like paint was applied. And I talked to many great experts because I was so deeply involved with Elephanta, one of whom was Dr. Nagaswamy, who was one of the great experts from the South, of course Dr. Jankit. But Dr. Nagaswamy was saying to me that like all other sites, and you see it also, of course you see it at Ajanta, so you see so much of the painting there even at Ajanta. So we must assume that Elephanta would have been like that. So I said, let's recreate, using what we know from Ajanta, let us recreate a sense of what these caves must have looked like. There would have been oil lamps hanging, there would have been carpets, what would have been the effect of that? That's where we should invest money, rather than to recreate, to give people a sense of how incredible this. I mean, they're incredible even now because the craft workmanship is so highly skilled. When you think about it, that it's cut into the rock and they are so perfect, these sculptures. There's not even an inch which is off. To give people, but to get them excited as to what it must have been. And who were the people who would have used this site? How would they have used it? So when you do the research on that, the earliest mention of this site is the Emperor Pulakesin II, who calls it the jewel of the East. And he says it's because all the ships, there was a lot of trade with Arabia, and all the ships coming in, this was the first piece of land that they would see after a long journey at sea. And they would stop there. They would collect a kind of tithe from them, a kind of tax from them to berth at the island. And then they would come to the mainland. So, or go to Nalasopara and all those areas where they would go, the Konkan area where they would go. They didn't come to Bombay so much as they would then make the trip more to the Konkan areas. that's where it was much more developed. Not Bombay, because Bombay was too marshy and it was a swampy marshland at that time. And so, so that's the earliest indication of the fact that it was in fact, that it was very wealthy because they used to get a lot of money. You know, for many reasons, it was maybe because in thanks to sort of the wealth that was created in this island, they built these caves. We don't know why, but we do know that they were probably earlier Buddhist caves, that we know, because there are two stupas which have not been excavated, one at the top of the hill and one at the bottom. The one at the bottom is very derelict. The other one, which is on the other hill, not the one where the Elephanta caves are, but the other hill, where there are a few caves, and right at the top there is a very clearly a mound. We've climbed up there and looked at it. It's not been excavated. In a way, possibly it's good that it's not being excavated, because God knows how it would be looked after and maintained, you know. But at some stage, probably, once we have the technology and we have the wherewithal to manage Elephanta properly, I think we should probably explore its Buddhist origins. It is 70% of Elephanta is under protected forest land. It's under the forest department, protected forest land. The other parts of it are protected by CRZ, and then it comes under the Rural Development Ministry, and the Tourism Development Corporation is involved. Now all their intentions clash, and this is essentially where the problem lay. And then we have a very, very difficult sarpanch. We tried very hard with him when we started out, because in great enthusiasm we wanted to carry the whole community, and we did a lot of work there with the Rotary Club. We set up a balwadi, we set up a women's self-help group, we set up a skill development, you know, to help them, because they sell all these objects. We even did some workshops for them as to what they might want to do. There are issues and problems that they have, and of course I worked over 10 years at Elephanta, so they all know me extremely well. I know every villager at Elephanta. I've been to all their houses, we've done detailed documentation of the village, in fact. I think that the important thing for Elephanta is that the government that we respect what the site demands, which is that it was a religious site. It was a great site. Now in India, religious sites do tend to be a little carnivalesque. There's no question about that. But it can be done in an organized fashion. You go to any temple, it's like a carnival, you know, and there are people sitting outside. No, so I'm not saying that that aspect of it should not be there. But the government intended to put up an SM world there. And I was just absolutely shocked when I heard that there's an SM world, because what you do is you devalue your site. What you're saying is people are going to come for the SM world, not for Elephanta, you know. And I was just a little shocked because I really felt, you know, maybe, you know, one can have a debate about these things, but I felt that the island just, it's green, it's quiet, it's beautiful. People really love that. That's the character that we should encourage. That coming from the hustle and bustle of the city, can you provide, even Mumbaikars, an alternative space that is just so naturally and environmentally green and beautiful. So instead of doing that, they cut the forest department people in the 70s, used to be about 20 to 30, to manage that whole area, because there's a fairly substantial amount of land. When I was there, just 10 years, 15 years ago when we were working, they reduced it to 4 people. So those 4 people would say, now how can we manage? We can't do anything. And so you see this forest looking dry and in such a poor condition, because manpower was not supplemented. If somebody passed away, they would just not refill the job. The other thing is that the Sarpanch totally dictated everything on the island. So the whole emphasis was on just that little spine of shops, and he controlled it. because he paid off everybody, he went there. We found the police department, policemen who were supposed to be patrolling the island, working as waiters in the shop. And he owned all the shops, he owned the restaurants, he owns half the boats are owned by him, the other half are owned by this. So he completely had captured the economics of the island and held everybody ransom because he was keeping all the right people happy. And he threatened to throw me into the sea. He threatened to throw my architects into the sea. The big battle with him started is because he had a shop in a restaurant right outside the caves. And we said, this is prohibited by law. He threatened me and threatened everybody, but the ASI demolished it. And therefore, today, if you go to the site, it's very peaceful. That immediate top, but it wasn't like that earlier. We covered up the nalas, we did all the paving. We worked with that whole wall, the railings, all of that. We worked with the ASI to plan and do. But the ASI also would tell me, when they were doing the work, they said, I remember the superintending archaeologist called me once and he said, madam, he's not letting our boats land because he controls the boats and they've got another boat. He was preventing the ASI boat, which carried the cement, etc., the bricks to do the walls and the work. He was not letting them land. As INTACH, one of the big problems we have everywhere, all sites, and the reason we have problems, because we're involved with construction, we're involved with restoration of major monuments, is we do not give bribes, we are scrupulously honest, and this is a problem. It's one of the reasons we get targeted. So we prepared the management plan, which was submitted to UNESCO in 2004 and got a very high commendation. It was given to, it's the official plan that went from the ASI to UNESCO. We did a lot of work. That becomes very important before anything can take our legal status. It's the entire island of Elephanta that is covered by the Act. Okay? And it's very clear. And then working with that, we were able to develop buffer zones, make sure that CRZ and all the other laws that can supplement and ensure that this is a protected area were developed. So we did detailed study. You will see our management plan. We hired Tata Institute of Social Sciences to do a detailed demographic, economic profile of the island, environmental, geographic profile of the island. We had an IIT professor come and do a geographic profile of the island. Now, what people don't know is that Elephanta is on the fault line. There is a fault line that runs through Bombay and through the Taluva, and it goes in a couple of directions. And one of the lines goes under Elephanta. So it is in a seismic zone of up to 5 or 6 on the Richter scale. Okay? And we had Professor Subramaniam from IIT, who is the seismic expert. He came and did a geological study of Elephanta. We did everything. One of the reasons we did that is because they were dredging on the rear part of Elephanta for JNPT. And because they were dredging on the rear part of Elephanta for JNPT, it was slightly destabilizing the caves. We felt it had the potential. We don't know. I mean, it depends on how much of dredging you do, you know. At what point you keep on chopping away the island, and at what point will it actually also impact the cave? So we looked at air, we looked at disaster management. What are the disasters? So we looked at seismic, we looked at this dredging, we looked at, we worked with the mangroves, we worked with Bombay Natural History Society to work on the mangroves, on a mangroves rehabilitation plan, on a forest rehabilitation plan. So the potential of the island is enormous. For a very creative, you can have artists go there and have artist camps, you can have music festivals. We should be doing a music dance festival every month, every weekend probably at Elephanta. If you really wanted to open it up, that's what you should do, because Shiva is a god of dance. You know, Ganesh is the god of music. These are the things that we should be putting out there. Encourage art institutions and people to work with them. Instead, what they want to do is to put an SE world, if it happened, go to the courts. Because we have gone to the courts in the case of the mills. We managed to save 4 of the mills, which they're going to now turn into a museum. We went to the courts basically we went for Kotachiwari. We've saved Kotachiwari. We're now helping Rajan Jayakar with the High Court. You know, so we do have a history of, in case of very serious aberrations, appealing to the, if nothing else works, going to the court. So what we were able to do in the end is we were able to do the management plan, send it to UNESCO. We were able to do many more draft guidelines. We've done the tourism management plan, the comprehensive development plan. But we were also able to do the site museum, which unfortunately is in a bad state. We cleaned up the entire site, so what you see today is the result of INTACH's work. And we also did the working drawings to redo the whole jetty. And we built the toilet. So there's a toilet at the bottom of the hill now, which is I think should be, I haven't seen it for some years now, but it hopefully is in a decent condition. And I just think that is the beginning of the end. You electrify, what is the intention? You know, we need to work with the vision. What we must have is, what would we like this island to become? No one is saying that you don't have a restaurant, or you don't have amenities, or you don't have shops, but how you develop them, how you present them, the way it is done, and how you respect that environment in which it's in. It is in a very green environment. The focus should be on greening the island. The focus should be on perhaps restoring some of the mangroves and the beaches. There's no effort to clean up the garbage. So those are the things which need to be addressed. You know, can we also the steps? What has happened with the steps going up now? Because the villagers have all created pakka sites on the steps. Those steps, which are 100 years old, are now all collapsing. And the steps are owned by the ASI, but the land on either side of the steps is Forest Department. So they're half in Forest Department, half on ASI. It's all very confused. That's why we created that special purpose scheme. We also did designs for the people sitting there. They said, no, we only insist that people sit on the steps. We said, all right, if you sit on the steps, don't have these torn plastic covers. Let's put some beautiful green tarpaulin. Let's do it well. Let it be environmental. Use wood. Use a kind of canvas, green canvas, which goes with the green cover. You know, do things which are environmentally and visually sensitive. Use materials which go with the environment. So, you know, we were even trying to raise funds to do all of it. It's not a lot of money. I mean, it would cost nothing. It would probably cost 50 lakhs to do that whole, to make that for the, that is where the MTDC should be investing money. Right. So that the visual, when you come out, but my intention has been is that you preserve the site as an environmentally sensitive site, as a green site. It is a forest site, you know, protected forest, and that you respect that part of it. And so not try all to make the rest of it into an entertainment. I work with many people, Dr. Gurshekar, Dr. Jamkhetkar, Dr. Nagaswamy, all the M.N. Deshpande, all the important art historians and archaeologists who worked on our greatest, and they all agreed with what our intentions were. So I think that means that we need to respect what the site asks for, and not impose our views of what it should be. You know, that sensitivity has to be there. if we're going to preserve our culture. It's not just Elephanta. I feel strongly about the cave architecture of Maharashtra. You know, UNESCO said they would be happy to do a serial nomination if we would consider Kanheri, Karla, Bhaja, Beksa, all of these great caves. Jogeshwari also. I worked on Jogeshwari as well. And it's so, I mean, as one individual, it's just, now I'm Vice Chairman of INTACH, and there are many responsibilities as a result of that. And so it becomes difficult, but definitely Elephanta is something that I feel was the first, my initiation into conservation in a sense, and therefore still very important to me. And I hope that as long as I'm alive, I'm able to protect it from some of these, what I think not just myself, as I said, it's a consensus among scholars, archaeologists, art historians. This is what the site should, how the site should be preserved. Its sanctity should be preserved.